Hi, Marc Warnke here with PackGoats.com. I want to talk about hauling goats. Now, this is the second video I've made on this, and I've learned some things since the last one. And again, this is a new sport. We got to remember we're adapting and we're learning. I run a lot of goats, and so one of the things I kind of want to have as a caveat to my last video is that I normally don't tie up my goats in their container. Now, let me say that clearly. I normally don't tie up my goats if they're used to being with each other. But now that I have 17 packers, juveniles, new ones coming in and rotating through, I'm putting new goats in there. And when I put a new goat in there that's a subdominant, everybody tries to kick his ass. And it really becomes an issue. So I do advise, if you're somebody that has multiple goats, that you are tying them up sometimes. And then when you have a regular crew that knows how to be together kindly in your enclosure, then just throw them in there and they'll be fine. But it does take them a while to work through that. So I want to say that. The other thing about hauling goats is, remember, you need airflow, but you need not too much. You need some space, but remember, they like to kind of be cramped in there, and you need them to not overheat. So making all those things happen at once, plus having room for your gear. Because you got to remember, if I can easily fit 6 goats in this, and this is a 6.5 foot bed. But if those 6 goats are taking up all my bed, then where do I put all my panniers and my backpack and all my equipment? If you got 6 packers, you got a fair amount of equipment too. And that's where the haulers come in and making something like this that'll do that. Now, you can get these from me at PackGoats.com, and we make them for people. We even have like a DIY kit you can buy that'll show you how to build your own and all that stuff. But you'll need somewhere to put your panniers and your gear, or you need to count on the fact that you're going to lose your whole back seat in your truck if you have one. So you got to remember, hauling goats effectively in a truck, which is an advantage. You can get into trailheads nobody else can, because you don't have to haul a trailer. And you have the advantage of using the suspension on your vehicle, which doesn't beat your goats up in the drive. So I really like that. Now remember, when you put goats in a hauler, the reason I discovered how many would haul in there is because they like to squish together. So they'll all lean at each other so they're not fighting the invisible man. And in doing that, they space tightly together and they get hotter. And so you're going to want to make sure you have good ventilation. Now, I've built these haulers in all black, and as long as I have good ventilation, they've been fine. And that's been in 100-degree heat. I've tested all the heats, and you can be as skeptical as you want. As long as you have solid ventilation, the outside doesn't matter as much. Now, I did paint my roof white in that black one, and that helped. I mean, you literally could touch the underside of it, it didn't have heat, where before when it was black it did. But that was the only surface that I was really super concerned about, was the roof. So you can see I get back ventilation through here, and then through the front ventilation, it's through these little slider doors that are on top. And if you can actually see them through here, what happens is the airflow runs across the top. And so now you get that hot air and that pee air, because remember, they can get lung issues due to the breathing of their own methane and breathing dust and poo and all that stuff. And all that air runs across the top, but it doesn't necessarily billow and create a big giant everything flying up in the air like a lot of times a horse trailer will. So that's why I kind of configured it like that. So if you're going to go completely DIY, just remember, you need to keep the wind off of them. You can't have them like getting blasted by freeway wind, but you don't want no wind either. You don't want just a box. You got to have that perfect in between. And this one solved it, but you can solve it in your own ways, like I did in the beginning when I started. It was just kind of a thrown together steel and grid work, and did that kind of thing. And you can make it work. And so what I suggest you do is just be conscientious again that you're going to need room for storage, that you're going to need room for goats. A lot of people ask me about the height. Minimum height I've found, and remember, I got big horned goats, is 57 inches. A lot of people ask me about that. 57 inches. This one's actually taller because with the height of this truck, I figured I can't get through any drive-thrus anyway. But a standard like Ford F-150 with a 57-inch top can still get through driveways and parking garages and all that good stuff, but still have enough room for the goat. So it's a functional unit you can leave on. Now let's go on to the horse trailers and talk about those and haul what we're going to do, and we're going to haul them in a trailer side and what things to consider there. All right, so with trailers, the key thing to remember is, number one, tandem axles. You need 2 axles. If you blow one tire, everybody's okay, you're okay. You blow one tire on a single axle, goats are dead, you may be dead. It's really a big deal. And when you have dual axles, when you're hauling in the backcountry, one wheel will span a bump while the other one is gliding over the top of it. So a dual axle trailer is really, really smooth in comparison to a single axle. And if you go to those really light utility haulers, those are bouncy some bums because they're really light. And remember, the harder you are in your goats getting to the trailhead, the more worse they're going to be in shape once you arrive. And my rule is anything over 4 hours, I'm going to let them sleep on the trailhead, and we're going to get up and pack in the next morning, because the trailer ride is so hard on them, and the hauler ride. The thing that packers use as a rule is 2 hours in the trailer, or excuse me, 1 hour in the trailer is like 2 hours on the trail, because they're fighting the invisible man and they're exerting themselves the whole time back there. So if you haul for 4 hours, that's like they've already been on the trail for 8, and just loading them up panniers trying to hit the trail and go, it's pretty hard on them. So I do recommend you consider that. With horse trailers, tandem axle is important. This is a cheap trailer. I think I paid $1,600 or $1,700 for it. It is considered a stock trailer, which you can get cheaper than horse trailers. So I recommend, as a goat hauler, that's kind of where you look. I really like to have this front compartment. This front compartment is really nice. If I don't have a lot of goats and I actually want to use this as storage, I can actually build storage up here and everything else. And it has this separation bar in here that I can keep the goats out of this front area, and I can actually open and close that. So this thing's really, really nice. And I like having this front area though. This is where I'll throw my juveniles, and then I'll throw my big boys at back. If there's some that just get picked on commonly, I'll use this as a separation for them. So I throw that up there. Now, as far as inside of here, this is the main reason I like stock haulers, because stock haulers have 2 ways you can open the door. You can either open the door this way, which is a big one, which is kind of a pain in the butt, honestly, when you're loading goats, because you're loading them one at a time. Or you have this slider door, which makes loading goats really easy. You shove one in, you close it, and you're ready to go. So I do suggest this kind of door configuration. It makes it really easy. These trailers are a little bit shorter, so they're seen as the horse community as kind of a tight, cramped space. And again, there's not as much demand for these trailers, so you usually can pick them up for cheaper. They're not that well used, and they work really well for us as goat packers. The last thing I want to mention, and you can see how that separation works in there. The last thing I want to mention, do you remember how I was talking about the billowing effect that happens with goats? You'll actually see that this whole area back here is bare. And the reason it's bare is because the air's coming in from inside without proper flow this way, and it creates like a tornado effect on the back of this. The way you know if you have billow in your trailer is when you put fresh hay or hay in there, there's the leafy stuff. You're going to get in after you've hauled your goats, and it's going to be all over their backs. That's how you'll know if you have billow in your current system, and that isn't good for the goat's lungs to get that. I have never figured out how to eliminate that in my horse trailer. It's just something I accept. I can't figure out how to not get it to do it, but my hauler doesn't do it in the back of my truck. The other last thing I want to mention is that the hay that's back here, remember, Forest Service needs that to be weed-free. Now, the weed-free designation is really weird. I mean, the only proof of weed-free is the bag it came in or the straps that were on it. And so that's what I do. I honor it. I get weed-free hay. That's what I use. And I layer it in there so I'm not billowing it all out so it's not all dusty and going everywhere. I lay it out in shingles. And then I actually keep the strap, the weed-free strap that's around it, and I tie it inside of here every season. So that way I have the proof that I had weed-free hay in the back of my thing. And I don't know how else to do it. I don't know how they expect us to prove it, really, because once you use it, it's detached from it. But I would have to imagine that'll suffice. But that's something to consider as well. So I hope that's helpful in hauling your goats. Just remember, if you want them to perform well for you on the trailer, you can't make it a nightmare to get from your house to the trailhead. I hope that helps. Marc Warnke, PackGoats.com.